rumors continue to swirl around Paul George and the Orlando Magic ahead of the NBA draft tonight. Now, we're going to dive into the interest from Jeff Weltman and the Magic and the interest from Paul George about a potential co-marriage in the upcoming season. Now, before we get into that, like I've said, the NBA draft is tonight, so we would love to hear from everybody here at Magic Digest about what you would rather the Magic do with the pick tonight. Would you rather them take a young guy, add to their already growing core, or potentially package it in a sign and trade deal to get Paul George or any other player out there, or potentially just package it in a regular trade? What would you like to see the most from the Orlando Magic? Now, it's time to dive into the rumor mill that continues to give us content here, and that is we're looking at the NBA trade report on Twitter. Now, this is just a rumor, but there's plenty of sources to back this up. The Orlando Magic has serious interest in acquiring Paul George. George is expected to opt into his current deal and then request a trade. He's looking for a sign and trade. He's looking for a team to give him an extension. He doesn't really want to stay with the Clippers. The Clippers obviously added they extended Kawhi Leonard, and their big targets for the summer are going to be trying to continue their marriage with Paul George and obviously continue their relationship with James Harden, continue to have that core moving forward. Now, is that something that Paul George is interested in? I personally don't think so, and I think a lot of people are starting to realize, look, Paul George is probably not in the right place to return to the Clippers. So what does that leave us? Well, that leaves us with reports saying, look, he wants to leave, and the Magic are here to swoop in. So now, this is, I think, a very valid rumor, a very valid source. I'm seeing reports from Chris Haynes that are saying, look, there's interest on both sides. It's just, about what the Magic are willing to give up in the sign and trade, right? There's $50 million in cap space. Are we willing to give those assets up to Paul George, sign him for an extended amount of time? I think the Magic are more interested in that than Klay Thompson. Now, there are other suitors, obviously, for Paul George, like the Sixers and the Warriors, who a lot of people, those are teams that have been in win-now situations for longer than the Magic have been. But that's really those are the teams that they're going to have to compete against. So that's the general report. Now, what's the interest from Paul George? I think that's probably the next biggest question to ask when we're looking at this sort of situation. What's the interest of the player? Because that's probably the most important thing, of any situation like this, is the interest of the player. Because if Paul George was already interested in the Clippers or coming back, I think that deal would have been done last year. So Bill Simmons of The Athletic reports that the Sixers have cap space. There's been Paul George rumors. I don't know why Paul George wouldn't go to Orlando over Philly if I had the choice, and I'm betting on a team. I'm betting on Orlando over Philly, and that's just me. Not a lot of guys left. This is now year 10 of Embiid era, and they've never made a conference finals. I think he makes a great point here. I think when I'm looking at different kinds of situations whenever it comes to Paul George, I don't know why he would want to go to the Sixers instead of a team like Orlando that's younger, that doesn't have injury issues, and isn't exactly a town that's going to thrust a ton of pressure on Paul George. I think the Orlando sports town, it's a good sports town, but nothing like the vitriol that you're going to experience in Philly. So I don't understand why Paul George wouldn't want to go to a situation where the team is younger, there's less pressure, they're going to pay you the same amount, and you've got a core that he's already said that he really likes. Now, this is where I'm starting to get the potential interest from Paul George, and where I'm starting to buy things. He said in a podcast episode that among the players that are 25 years older, that are at least 25 years, are under 25 years old in the NBA, excluding Anthony Edwards, Luka Doncic, and Victor Wembanyama, George said that he would choose to build a franchise around Banchero. I think of who's shown that they're ready for the next jump, and he continues on and says, look, that's Paolo. That's something that I'm surprised with. Orlando has been so good. That is probably the biggest. It's coming from the source himself saying that Orlando is a real player in this. That's huge. I think that is probably the biggest thing that is making me buy into Paul George's interest, because he didn't have to say this. He didn't have to go out and say, look, he could have just said, look, I'm looking at all options. Orlando's really good. They got a good young core. I'm obviously, would be open to the idea. No, he's saying, like, look, outright on a podcast episode, obviously asked about it. He's saying, look, they are a very good team. I don't see, I'm open to it. I'm surprised. And Paulo, you know what? Outside of like these other teams that I'm naming, or these players that I'm naming on teams that can't afford me, like the Mavericks, Timberwolves, and Spurs probably could, but they're not in a win now situation just yet. Outside of those teams, outside of these guys, this guy's the number one. This situation's the number one. That's why I think it's realistically one of the better situations for him. That's kind of really trying to target him, especially when we're also talking about the Warriors, who are going to give up potentially Kuminga, and we're going to get into a potential trade later, and Kuminga and some of their young guys, some of their picks too, to get him. He's going to a team he would have a lot of pressure in Golden State as well, so that's certainly something he's going to have to keep in mind. But also another thing that we needed to gauge is the interest from the Magic. What are the Magic thinking right now? I think that that's something that a lot of people want to gauge. And we have a quote from Jeff Weltman. He said this a few days ago in a press conference. I think it's always important to get your draft picks right. If you can, it's your chance to add a good young player who will continue the legacy of what you're trying to build. Now, obviously, that's probably more centered towards what they're going to do tonight, what they're going to do in the draft. Maybe they don't want to give a current pick away. I could see that being the case. I could see that potentially being, look, we know that as a small market team, we're not going to be able to use this cap space to the absolute best of our ability. If we sign Paul George, we're not going to probably be able to re-sign. I think you would be able to get Suggs on a deal, and obviously Franz. I'm getting to Franz in a second, because you certainly wouldn't want to give him up in a trade. Now, but you would have to end up giving up a guy like Wendell Carter Jr. Fultz would definitely be gone, I think. Where would Anthony Black fit into all this? I think he ends up getting traded in a deal for this, and then you're giving up a lot of assets. And as a small market team, when you go into a win now situation, usually you like to do it with a ton of picks, and the Magic certainly do have some picks down the line. They have, I believe, the Phoenix and Washington pick in the upcoming years, but is that exactly going to be something that you want to commit to? And I think Jeff Weltman has said, look, we're going to try to get Klay Thompson, but we want it on a shorter deal. You're not going to be able to do that with Paul George. So I think the Magic's interest, just like Paul George's interest, because he's got plenty of suitors, so I'm not saying he's 100% interested, but the Magic's interested is kind of, it's a little tame. It's just still feeling the waters. Who's going to be out there? What exactly is this sign and trade going to involve? Who exactly are we going to have to give up to get him? I think that that's really important. Now, one of the things I also wanted to talk about is the Franz Wagner piece of it. He is somebody that we're going to have to keep, and pairing him with Paul George is going to be extremely important. We can't give a player like him up. Now, I know a lot of Magic fans were very frustrated with how he played, especially, in the last part of the Cleveland series. But I think realistically, when we saw what Scottie Barnes was paid, you're going to have to shell out a max contract. Now, that I don't know at what point in this upcoming season it's going to happen. I don't think it would happen in this offseason, frankly. But at some point, they're going to have to pay Franz. You don't want to really give him up. I think that that's probably the biggest thing right now is, look, giving him up is going to be too tough. It's going to be just too much and not something that you want to do. All right. So now that we have all of those out of the way, I think we got to look at how would this happen. The Magic are interested at a certain point, I think. They don't want to blow it up and they'd rather play it safe. Paul George, I think he didn't have to say how interested he was, but he did. So I think that that's a very good sign. And there are reports saying, look, I think he's really out of town with the Clippers. So how exactly would this happen? Well, I think that it would probably have to happen in a manner like this, where the Clippers get this is a mock trade that was proposed by Bleacher Report. They're sending out a ton prior to the draft tonight. It is Jonathan Isaac, Anthony Black, Joe Ingles, who they'll have to pick up his contract, and the current pick tonight, the number 18 pick, and a 2026 first round pick. They're saying the Phoenix or Washington one. Look, and that's straight up just for Paul George. They would make some cap room work. It wouldn't really exactly be 100% right, but I think both teams are oddly flexible with the roster that they have. So this would be how it would happen. This is what I think would like. I think if you're a Clippers fan, you're saying like, look, if he doesn't want to be here and this is a sign and trade, this is a fine deal. You're going to use that 18th pick, and then we'll see exactly where the 26th first round pick and the protections that it has, where that's going to end up. I think you're okay with it. You're getting Jonathan Isaac, who has been injury prone, but he's playing better basketball as of late. And you're getting Anthony Black. You're really investing in that point guard who's kind of that floor general defensive guy. And you get Joe Ingles, who's a veteran shooter. So if you want to continue to try to like have the two timelines thing, it gives you an opportunity to do that. Or if you want to deal him at the deadline in this upcoming year to a contending team that's looking for shooting, you could do that as well. And you could also deal Jonathan Isaac too at the next deadline. It gives you a lot of flexibility here because you're not taking on a ton of cap hits with this trade. So I think that that's exactly how it would end up having to happen. Outside of that, I don't know exactly how you would be able to get this trade or to get this deal done outside of these teams. You could probably mix and match a couple of these guys, but I don't really know exactly the logistics of that as far as the cap. But the biggest thing here is when you're giving up the picks, you're not giving up Franz. I think that's going to be the biggest thing whenever we're talking about the Magic acquiring Paul George. Now, let me know what you think the Magic should do with the pick tonight. Obviously, we're coming up towards the buzzer, especially with all this Paul George news, and free agency opens in a couple weeks. We're actually just before a couple weeks, so we're right inside that deadline. But that's all the time we have for today. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and we'll see you next time after the draft.